Hello, this is Sean Mullery from Electronic Engineering at IT Sligo, and what I'm going to show you in this example is we're going to look at how to make a pointer to a struct. Now, in order to make sure that you don't get mixed up between pointers inside structures and the pointer to the struct itself, I'm going to leave one of the pointers inside the struct as I had from the previous program where we used the first name as a pointer to a character rather than a character array, okay? Just so that you can see both of them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the employee called Sean, I'm going to leave that unmodified, and I'm going to change the employee called Fergal. Now, we still have to create a structure called Fergal. Okay, so Fergal is an employee struct. That still has to be there because we actually have to create the memory space for the information that we're going to put in there. The pointer is only going to be an address that's going to point to that. Okay, so to make the pointer, we'll say struct employee asterisk Fergal. We have to give it a name. I'm going to call it Fergal PTR, and do that. Okay, now remember, you generally read these things backwards. Fergal PTR is a pointer to an employee struct. Okay, now what I then also have to do is make sure that the two of those are linked. So I would do that by saying Fergal PTR is assigned the address of Fergal. Now, at the moment, that's not much use because there's no actual information in Fergal, but it does point us to the correct memory space for that. So now what I want to do is I could still use Fergal as it stands, and in fact I'm going to just save that, make sure there are no errors so far, and make sure this still works as it did, which is, as you can see there, it's working perfectly fine. Okay. However, I'm now going to use the pointer rather than that. Now that means that everywhere where Fergal is written, I have to write Fergal PTR. And the second thing that I need to do is I need to use a different notation for accessing the elements. I use a little arrow notation so that you know that it's a pointer that we're dealing with and not just an ordinary structure variable. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of that, and I'm going to copy it so that I can speed it up a little bit, my changes to each one of these. Still a very good chance of me making a mistake here though, so keep an eagle eye out for that, and I'll only probably spot it when I come to doing a compile. So if you spot any mistakes, try and be aware of it before it happens, so that when I go and try and figure it out that you've spotted what I've done wrong. Now, down here is where we made the change to the hourly salary. Again, I'm going to change it in the same way just to show you that that can all be done via pointer. And pardon the pun, but if this all seems a little bit pointless to you as to why we're doing all this, it's simply because we're going to find later in the course that pointers to structures as well as other things tend to be very, very useful. But for the moment, you just have to see them in action. And the easiest way to see them in action is to see them doing the same things as we used to do with ordinary variables. So I've changed all of those, and I'm hoping I haven't forgotten anything, but there's a good chance that I have. So let's have a look. Save it first and do a compile. Oh, no, it's worked perfectly well. Okay, so we can see there that Fergal Henry and all his details and so on, and his salary, including the updated salary, are all there. Okay. Now, just before we finish up on this, I should point out that while I've shown you this new syntax that we use, the arrow thing, we can still use the old pointer syntax that we use for everything else. So we can use the dot there. We can, knowing that Fergal PTR is a pointer, we can use a little set of brackets here and put an asterisk there. So what that's basically saying is it's going to Fergal PTR, using the asterisk, which is dereferencing it, so that it's basically going to the actual structure itself, which is called Fergal, and then using the dot after it, and that will also work in those situations. So we can see that that is. Let's just check it here, and we'll just make sure we do that down here as well, just to try both of them, because always what the danger here is that when you're testing these things, you need to test everything about them, because what can often happen is a little random error could occur where the same information is still in there from previously. So what this prints out is information from something previously. So we're going to use our little dot thing there like that. And as you can see, it's still coming out perfectly. Okay, so that is another mechanism of doing it. Now, to some extent, as we've seen in many things that we've done previously, there are more than one ways to deal with a particular variable or to write a particular program in C. So we've seen previously that we can use fors and while loops almost interchangeably, and you know, we can deal with arrays and pointers to arrays and so on. We can use them interchangeably, and we can decide to write them one way or another. So here's another example where we're given the two different options. Generally speaking, if we're dealing with a structure or dealing with a pointer to a structure, we use that arrow syntax, and that makes it much more obvious than to somebody that's looking at it that that's what we're dealing with. Even though it should be fairly obvious from this because we've got the little dot there that we're dealing with a structure, generally speaking, we would use the other syntax that I've used elsewhere. So try and stick to that, but just in case you thought that this would not work or otherwise, it does in fact work. So just be aware of that. Okay.